how to handle toxic persons at work. Hello and welcome to Communication Psychology and HR. My name is Gerhard and I'm a psychologist from Hamburg, Germany, here in the Republic of Moldova for many years, specialized in international, intercultural and multi-language context. This is the question. I get it at almost every seminar, every public speaking event. It has become a trend to label other people as toxic. And it's understandable if we just look in our media and social media environment, political landscape and so on. However, I would recommend caution. This, what I'm going to say, is probably not very palatable to many of us, especially if we are on the receiving end of toxic people. However, I would recommend to step back a bit and rule out other explanations for their toxicity. For example, angry customers, impolite, rude guests and so on may have an explanation for their behavior. We don't know whether our product has caused significant harm or they relied on a service of which not functioning caused serious trouble. So before we know exactly what their situation is, I wouldn't recommend labeling people as toxic. But this is, I think, more or less clear for people who work in customer relations. What often happens too is that people that tell us unpleasant things about ourselves, about our ideas, are quickly labeled toxic by us. So it's a defense mechanism to shut down communication, to don't let critical information come to us by quickly labeling the other person as toxic. And it's easy because we can easily pick on some undesirable quality of them, like their tone of voice, the word choice. They didn't formulate the criticism exactly in the words we would expect them to do. And then it's a quick defense for us. We also should take into consideration that, and here comes the unpleasant part, that we may be actually facilitating their toxic behavior. This doesn't mean that we are guilty of their behavior or we are directly causing that, but so-called toxic people, they are rarely toxic in every situation. So if a priest shows up or a policeman or an important relative or somebody they respect, they can quite quickly switch to very pleasant and polite behavior. So the question is, why do they allow themselves behave toxically in certain situations? Of course, we cannot go deep into all rabbit holes in psychology here, because what actually happens, and this is an ongoing debate in personality psychology, there are people who believe that people have personality traits or types, which is even more controversial today. But people have some stable qualities that show up in all situations, more or less. And then there's the other person or the other perspective that claims that there is an interaction between person and situation, or that means that people are not aggressive in all situations, but they tend to have a profile. So if you have two people with the similar overall level of aggression, you will find that they have different situations in which they are aggressive. For example, some are more aggressive with people from the opposite sex, some with the same sex, with people in higher positions, or in people, others kick downwards. So the same here. Those people are toxic with certain people in certain situations typically. And if we are on the receiving end, we should ask the question, what is our contributing factor here? Once again, we shouldn't take the blame for their behavior or feel guilty about that. However, we should analyze a bit what we are doing in facilitating it. It can be that we haven't established proper boundaries, and our boundaries are permeable. They can bulldozer over us easily because we don't have established clear limits, what's acceptable and not. And of course, people who are really toxic, they don't want to respect any kind of rules, any limits. So they are the law of the land. So they establish in every situation what's right and what's wrong. So to establish boundaries with them, it's not pleasant. It's something very complicated, but it's something you could do step by step. How to do it? There are lots of good channels online on narcissism, on toxic personality types, and so on. And setting boundaries is one of the first recommendations. And the question is how to set boundaries step by step, because the other person is most certainly will try to tear them down, of course. Now at work, before jumping to the most drastic measures, like implicating the HR department or filing a formal complaint and so on, of course, if it's something really, really of the moral code, the permissible, of course, but often we have become a bit sensitive today, and it has been measured with social media, and during COVID people were more isolated from physical contact, so we rely more on asynchronous online contact, that we have become more sensitized, so we are more easily aroused emotionally. And this means that what in the past may have passed as a normal criticism or comment, today it triggers somebody. And it's not just the political triggers of political correctness, that you have not addressed somebody with the appropriate gender, or don't acknowledge climate change or something like this, but this sensitivity is in many other areas, that we are in general more prone to react emotionally. And if we have real physical contact, then this may make people appear more toxic than they really are. So, on the other hand, if we consume on more and more opinions that we believe are right, then those toxic people will get less and less feedback that what they believe it's wrong, because they probably will have their TikTok or Instagram channel telling them that their worldview is absolutely correct. They are in the right of berating other people, of shouting at them, and so on. So for them, they start living in their bubble, explaining to them while their toxicity is exactly how they should behave. It's the other person's fault. So people are segregating into different informational bubbles, and people who are toxic sometimes may not even realize that this is off limits, this is not normal behavior anymore, because if they have their internet feed full of influencers that say that this is normal, and they don't realize that for 99% of other co-workers this is not normal. So we cannot delve into very much depth here, but if you start a conversation with such people, you're respectful, try to leave them the possibility to repair their behavior, or to explain themselves. So if you tell them that, well, this is how I perceive your words, what's your intention? So you need to leave them a way out. It's not about who wins and who is guilty and who is not, but most probably there's an explanation, and those people, even if it's unacceptable, and we shouldn't accept behavior that is harassment and so on, of course, but all that which is still in the legal within the legal limits, but it's unpleasant and impolite, well, it comes from the family background of such people, their friends, their social media environment, and we need to show understanding for them. So we need to come to a common ground again. Because if we are overly antagonistic with such people, well, they will retreat in their media bubble, and then they will switch on the Instagram channel that says, well, all those complaining co-workers of you, they are just not real men or real women, they lack stamina, character, and so on. This means that you are actually a leadership type or something. And then this person will go on believing that that's their way to the top by shouting at other people and berating them. I hope this has given you some ideas where to go further. Once again, self-analysis should always be the first step, because very probably we too, in many situations, are toxic to other people. They may not tell them us, because we are maybe in an authority position, we are elderly, and so on. But self-analysis is always the first step. Have a nice week and much success with your communication. See you next week. Bye-bye.